Some of you may think you have some idea of how bad it is, how discriminatory, how brutal, how the system is rigged, but you don't really know the half of it, just like I once thought I knew but didn't. So if you don't really know the role the drug war has played in quintupling our nation's prison system, if you don't know that whites are just as likely to use and sell drugs as people of color, if you don't know all about the financial incentives that have been given to state and local law enforcement, millions of dollars paid rewarding law enforcement agencies for the sheer numbers of drug arrests, and if you're confused and think that maybe the various wars that have been declared on poor communities of color, the war on crime and the war on drugs, have been focused on rooting out violent offenders or drug kingpins, and if you don't know that the overwhelming majority of people arrested and swept into the system have been arrested for relatively minor crimes, and if you don't get that this system operates practically from cradle to grave, targeting young people at very young ages, often before they're old enough to vote, stopping, frisking, searching them, when all they may be doing is heading home with some Skittles in their pocket, well then please read my book. Of mass incarceration can be traced back to segregationists who once chanted segregation forever and then changed their tune with the passage of the Civil Rights Act and began chanting law and order and built a Get Tough movement, a movement designed by pollsters and political strategists who found that thinly veiled promises to get tough on them, a group not so subtly defined by a race, could be enormously successful in appealing to poor and working class whites. If you don't know about the Southern strategy, if you don't know about racial code language and the use of welfare and crime as a means to break the Democratic Party in the South and build a new Republican majority, and if you don't know about how this backlash emerged at precisely the same moment that work was vanishing, disappearing from inner city communities due to deindustrialization and globalization, leading to waves of joblessness and the economic collapse of inner city communities and rising crime, creating a perfect storm. Or if you're operating under some delusion that the Democrats have been the better angels, if you don't know that it was President Bill Clinton who mastered the game of using subtle racial theater, and that it was his administration, a Democratic administration, that escalated the drug war far beyond what his Republican predecessors even dreamed possible. If you don't know how the U.S. Supreme Court eviscerated Fourth Amendment rights and immunized the system from judicial scrutiny for racial bias, if you don't know this history, if you have some trouble connecting the dots between slavery, Jim Crow, and mass incarceration, then please educate yourself. I wrote my book in the hopes that it would be a tool, but there are many, many other good tools, excellent books and resources. Read Angela Davis's book, Are Prisons Obsolete? Read Douglas Blackman's book, Slavery by Another Name. Read Paul Butler's book, Let's Get Free. Read Christian Parenti's book, Lockdown America. Read Prison Profiteers, Who Makes Money Off of Mass Incarceration. Read Brian Stevenson's book, Just Mercy. And if you're an academic, you'll especially appreciate the data and analysis in Bruce Western's book, Punishment and Inequality. Outstanding book. Read Marie Gottschalk's book, Caught, The Prison State and the Lockdown of American Politics. I mean, I could spend all night describing the problem and telling you what to read, to learn about it, and the many different valid and competing perspectives that have been offered. But in the short time I have here tonight, I don't want to spend all my time describing the problem and telling you what to do to learn all about it. I want to take this time to challenge us, to wrestle with the question of what is required of us as people who are dedicated to racial and social justice at this moment in our history, 50 years after Selma. What now in our struggle for justice, in this era of mass incarceration? And I must say that in reflecting on this question, I find that I have little patience now for the politics and business as usual. I I no longer believe that this system will die a death of 1,000 little cuts, a little reform here, a little reform there. I no longer believe it. But what we've seen is that systems of racial and social control adapt too easily to minor reforms, and in fact have the capacity to be reborn in new form, tailored to the needs and constraints of the time.